Commissioner Cirillo indicated that he is recused on this. Is that correct?
That's correct, Ryan. Thank you so much. Let me know when to come back. Okay.
We will. Right, Scott, go ahead.
Good afternoon. This is an application by Boston Properties in partnership with the MTA, and it's seeking to develop a commercial office tower on the site at 317 to 341 Madison Avenue in the East Midtown neighborhood of Manhattan Community District 5. The site formerly accommodated the MTA's headquarters building and is also known as 343 Madison Avenue. The project will bring Class A office space to an area that is well served by mass transit and has a high density commercial office character. It will also create an opportunity for significant infrastructure upgrades and revenue generation for the MTA. Next slide, please. So the applicant is requesting 2 special permits to enable the proposed office tower development, both of which are available only to sites within the Vanderbilt corridor sub area. The first is a bonus floor area special permit pursuant to zoning resolution section 81633. It allows a bonus of up to 15 FAR to sites that undertake improvements to the pedestrian or mass transit circulation network in association with development. The second special permit is a waiver special permit, and it's pursuant to the following section of 81634. It enables recipients of the initial bonus floor area special permit to request waivers where accommodating that floor area is made prohibitive by other regulations. Next slide, please. So before we discuss the project, let's orientate ourselves with the site and its surrounds. 343 Madison Avenue is indicated with the yellow star and the red dashed outline here on the slide, on the block bounded by East 45th Street to the north, Vanderbilt Avenue to the east, East 44th Street to the south, and Madison Avenue to the west. The development site is located in the heart of Midtown's central business district, much of which is mapped C5-3 and has a base FAR of 15 for non-residential uses. The area is characterized by high density commercial office buildings. A strong street wall also defines this section of Madison Avenue, and it generally has retail activating the ground floor as well. The area is served by Grand Central Station, located 1 block to the southeast. Available there is the 4, 5, 6, 7, and shuttle subway lines, as well as the major terminus of the Metro North Railroad. The Long Island Railroad will also have a major terminus here to be known as East Side Access, which is planned for opening in late 2022. Next slide, please. So the site, as I mentioned, is within the Vanderbilt corridor sub area, which is outlined here in orange, and it's part of the much larger special Midtown district, which is indicated in the map on the left here. The Vanderbilt corridor provisions were adopted by the CPC in 2015, seeking to facilitate commercial development while improving pedestrian circulation around Grand Central. The recently completed One Vanderbilt project was the first to utilize the Vanderbilt corridor provisions, and it comprises a 30 FAR commercial office building on the southernmost block of the Vanderbilt corridor. That project is inclusive of numerous privately funded improvements to nearby transit infrastructure. The map on the right here shows the Greater East Midtown rezoning, which was adopted by the CPC in June of 2017. And that change to the text incorporated the Vanderbilt corridors provisions as well. Next slide, please. So 343 Madison Avenue is shaded here in orange. It sits centrally within the Vanderbilt corridor sub area, and you can see at the bottom the One Vanderbilt development as well. So as the owner of 343 Madison Avenue, the MTA released a request for proposals in 2013 for parties to undertake a redevelopment of the site under a 99-year ground lease. Boston Properties was successful in that request for proposals and are therefore a party to the current application. Next slide, please. So going below the surface here, the site exists in an area of major below ground transit infrastructure. The site is outlined in red on the left of the figure here, and immediately beside it is the East Side Access Concourse and the Metro North Railroad terminus. Close by are also several subway lines. As part of encouraging ongoing development, a fundamental driver of the Vanderbilt corridor text is facilitating privately funded improvements to this infrastructure. So to this end, the proposed redevelopment of 343 Madison Avenue is accompanied by upgrades to circulation in and around the network you can see here. We'll discuss more of the specifics of the improvements a little later in the presentation. Next slide, please. So taking a look at the development site specifically, 343 Madison Avenue is shown here with the red dashed outline with frontage to Madison Avenue, 44th Street and 45th Streets. The development site lot has an area of about 25,100 square feet. The development site is made up of 3 vacant commercial office buildings. Between 1979 and 2014, those buildings were used as the headquarters for MTA. The buildings have been vacant since 2014 and are in the process of being demolished now. Also within the development site is the blue shaded area, which fronts 44th Street. That represents a 5-story ventilation structure, which provides ventilation to the east side access concourse, which is deep below the site. This structure will remain under this proposal, but as part of the proposed zoning lot, the proposed development will cantilever above that structure. The remainder of the block is made up of 52 Vanderbilt Avenue, which is a 20-story commercial building on the northeast corner of the. On the southeast corner of the block is the Yale Club, which is a 22-story building constructed in 1915 in the Renaissance Revival style. The Yale Club is listed as a New York City landmark also. Next slide, please. So to give some visual context to that, this is the view from Madison Avenue looking east at the development site. You can see the existing vacant MTA HQ buildings here in the center, and they span 44th Street on the right to 45th Street on the left. Behind the green scaffolding, you can see those buildings here. The proposed development would occupy the full frontage that is shown behind the green scaffolding. Next slide, please. So this is the view from 45th Street looking south. You can see the development site on the right fronting Madison Avenue, including a small service building in the center of the frontage. On the left, fronting Vanderbilt Avenue, is the commercial building at 52 Vanderbilt Avenue. And highlighted in orange with the dashed line, you can see that this building also has a passage that connects below grounds to Grand Central Terminal. Next slide, please. So this is the view from 44th Street looking north. You can see the development site on the left fronting Madison Avenue. You can also see the 5-story ventilation structure located centrally within the 44th Street frontage. On the right, fronting Vanderbilt Avenue, is the landmark Yale Club. Next slide, please. So with that background, I'll now run through the details of each of the proposed actions. The first being a special permit for Grand Central public realm improvements. It allows an increase in the maximum permitted FAR on this site from 15 to 30 FAR in connection with on-site and off-site improvements being made to the pedestrian or mass transit circulation network. The special permit also takes into account matters of building design, bulk, character, and sustainability of the resulting development, and those are attributes we'll step through now. Next slide, please. So here's a rendering of the proposed development in the context of its East Midtown surrounds, looking east towards Brooklyn and Queens. The large building on the right is 1 Vanderbilt, the only other development to have utilized the proposed special permit previously. So the proposed development itself is a 753,000 zoning square foot or 30 FAR commercial office building with a height of 1,050 feet. You can see that its bulk is made up of 3 modules, a lower, a middle, and upper sections, which are defined by setbacks, mechanical area, and amenity floors with terraces. The modules reflect an effort to better distribute the worker population throughout the building in a post-pandemic setting. Next slide, please. So here's the ground floor plan of the proposed building, showing you how it will interact with the street. First, you can see the ventilation structure on 44th Street, which remains at ground floor level. Retail activation is proposed on the 44th Street frontage and Madison Avenue corner, as well as part of the 45th Street frontage at the top, and both of those areas are shaded in orange. A large portion of the Madison Avenue frontage has been dedicated to servicing a high volume lobby that has been dimensioned in such a way to ensure flexibility is available for things like temperature screening and queuing of occupants as they arrive in the building, again, in consideration of a post-pandemic setting. Also important to note is the building's core on the eastern side of the floor plate, where you can see numerous elevator banks and servicing areas have been concentrated. Now looking to the Madison Avenue and 45th Street corner, the area highlighted in yellow is proposed to be occupied by a high volume pedestrian entrance to the east side access concourse, which is deep below the sites. This 2,370 square foot space is part of the transit improvement package proposed with the application. Next slide, please. So here's a rendering of that east side access entrance and the proposed building above it at Madison Avenue and the 45th Street at the corner there. You can see the east side access entrance is proposed as a double height space that is integrated into the architecture of the building. The design recesses the corner in such a way as to define the space as public and distinct from the more private uses that occupy the ground floor plane. The entrance will have up to 60 feet of frontage to Madison Avenue and 35 feet of frontage to 45th Street. Next slide, please. So the east side access point will contain 3 40-inch wide escalators, as well as a 6-foot wide stair and an ADA elevator, all connecting to the east side access concourse below the sites. There's also a back of house stair along the eastern boundary being provided. Next slide, please. Here you can see the new concourse, which is shaded in the lighter yellow color, again, which is sort of deep below the site, and how it aligns with the development site, which is in the brighter yellow color. You can also see in blue shading the new platform alignment of the Long Island Railroad as it terminates at the east side access concourse. The proposed entrance is in a particularly strategic location here, corresponding to the southernmost end of the train as it pulls into the station terminus. Next slide, please. So here's some more detail of how the pedestrian connection drops below ground and into the new concourse. From here, commuters can turn right to connect underground to Grand Central Terminal or the east side access restrooms. To the left, commuters will find the southernmost platform access via the escalator bank at the top of the image there. Next slide, please. Here's a section of the proposed connection shaded in yellow and looking north. The proposed building is located above and is shaded in blue with Madison Avenue on the left. You can see the arrangement here has been carefully engineered to drop passengers below the level of the eastern neighbor at 52 Vanderbilt, as well as the Metro North Railroad train shed that sits below 52 Vanderbilt. It then meets the design configuration of the new concourse below, which is already constructed. Next slide, please. So the proposal is also inclusive of sidewalk widenings around the future building, which will assist with pedestrian congestion. The Madison Avenue sidewalk adjacent the site will be widened by 7 feet, which is shown here in green, to achieve a total sidewalk width of 20 feet. The 45th Street sidewalk will be widened by at least 5 feet where adjacent the proposed development, as shown here in blue, to achieve a minimum of 15 feet of sidewalk width. Due to the east side access volume immediately adjacent this blue area, this widening could not actually be accommodated within the development site itself, and therefore is proposed to extend the sidewalk 5 feet into the roadbed. Both of these widenings are a zoning requirement and are not linked to any bonus floor area. The 44th Street sidewalk already measures 15 feet wide, and as such will remain at its current width. Next slide, please. So now we'll take a look at some of the offsite improvements that are proposed as part of the proposal. They're located a short distance to the south of the southeast of the site, beneath 42nd Street at Lexington Avenue. That location is shaded in the red box here at the bottom right of the figure. The improvements relate to the Flushing Avenue subway line, or also known as the 7 train, at Grand Central and 42nd Street station, and they've been identified by the MTA as a priority for this project to address. Next slide, please. So zooming in a little, this figure captures the whole of the 42nd Street 7 train platform, and it's shaded in green. The proposed improvements are shown in yellow, and the upgrades really try and target congestion across the platform by better distributing commuters across the length of the platform. It's also worth noting here just graphically that Lexington Avenue comprises the boundary between Manhattan Community Boards 5 and 6. So some of these improvements actually exist in Community Board 6, while others and the proposed development itself are in Manhattan Community Districts 5. Next slide, please. So zooming in again, this slide shows the westernmost improvement to the platform, which involves the widening of an existing stair. The existing circumstances are shown in the top diagram in green, and the improvement is shown in the bottom diagram highlighted in yellow. This widening will result in an additional lane of pedestrian flow on this stair. Next slide, please. Another proposed improvement involves the construction of a new pedestrian passageway and 2 stairwells. Again, the existing circumstances are shown in the top diagram in green, with the new passage and the stairs highlighted in yellow at the bottom. The passage will be approximately 11 feet wide and 120 feet long, and it leads to a new stair that will land centrally within the platform to better distribute commuters along the length of the platform. Next slide, please. So here's a picture of where that passage would be located today. Next slide, please. And here's a rendering of the proposed extension of that passage. Next slide, please. The third improvement involves the widening of an existing stair also, this time located at the easternmost end of the same platform. The existing circumstances are shown in the top diagram in green, with the proposed widening highlighted in yellow at the bottom. This widening will result in an additional 2 lanes of pedestrian flow on the stair. Next slide, please. So again, here's a picture of that stair before the proposed widening. Next slide, please. And here's a rendering of the proposed stair after it's been widened. Next slide, please. So taking a look more at the building design part of the proposal now, the special permit granting a floor area bonus has a number of findings that relate to the design of the proposed building and its massing. The findings seek to ensure not just that additional floor area is accompanied by transit improvements, but also that the building is designed sensitive to its context. This east-facing rendering shows the recently completed One Vanderbilt on the right. Beyond in the back is the MetLife and the Chrysler buildings. The taller building on the left is 383 Madison Avenue. The proposed design uses a strong street wall, the top of which is indicated here with the orange dotted line to define its base, taking cues from the built form character to the north and south of the site. Setbacks above street wall reiterate the mid-rise and high-rise modules of the building, splitting its bulk roughly into thirds. So we want to note here that while a strong street wall would help contribute to the character of Madison Avenue in this location, the height that is currently proposed here, which is shown at the dotted line, is a little higher than staff have recommended for this site's context. Next slide, please. So this is a massing diagram looking at the building's address to the corner of Madison Avenue and 45th Street, looking southeast, where the new east side access entry is proposed. The base or street wall is shown here in the darker shaded blue color, with the tower volume recessed in the lighter blue color. You can see the building massing has been arranged to provide emphasis to this corner to highlight the public nature of the new east side access pedestrian entrance below at the corner. Next slide, please. So this slide shows some more of the building bulk and floor area distribution throughout the tower, including the 3 modules. The middle section diagram here shows the building cantilevering out above the ventilation structure for east side access that exists on 44th Street. And that happens once it reaches 6 stories above street level. The same section diagram shows the proposed street wall height relative to the height of the Yale Club, the eastern neighbor, which is a 22-story building that adjoins, and it matches the top of its mechanical bulkhead in the diagram here. Next slide, please. So the proposed tower top takes an orthogonal form that would contrast nearby features of the East Midtown skyline. Notable in proximity is the tapered tower top and spire of One Vanderbilt, as well as the spire and Art Deco features of the Chrysler building. Also nearby are the octagonal forms of the MetLife building and 383 Madison Avenue. The rendering shows a glass curtain wall integrated into the tower top. The prominence of the side core from the east, which you can see inset there on the right, is shown as a distinguishing feature from the glass curtain wall that makes up the remainder of the building's facade. And it will contribute a defining vertical element to the tower's architecture. The use of contemporary construction materials throughout will provide a contrast to that of the many granite-clad buildings in the area, like the Roosevelt Hotel to the north, the MetLife building or Grand Central terminals, while ensuring a high degree of environmental performance also. Next slide, please. So while we're on environmental performance with respect to sustainability, the special permit includes a finding that requires the applicant to detail their proposed sustainability targets and improvements as part of the application. The building is being designed to achieve a LEED Platinum certification, and as a baseline, the building will need to comply with Local Law 97, which was introduced in 2019. It is anticipated that the energy performance of the proposed development will exceed the requirements of the 2020 New York City Energy Conservation Code, as well as benchmarks set by comparable Class A office buildings nearby, such as One Vanderbilt. Various improvements that will contribute to its environmental performance are explored in the applicant's documentation. Next slide, please. So onto the second special permit, which is being requested, and it's available to sites that have obtained the initial bonus for floor area special permit. It allows those sites to request waivers where accommodating that floor area has been made prohibitive by other regulations. So we'll look at the detail of those waivers now. Next slide, please. So the first waiver relates to relief for street wall continuity. And in particular, the emphasis the design gives to the new east side access entrance has the effect of breaking the street wall on a portion of both the Madison Avenue and 45th Street frontages. The general extent of the recess requiring the waiver is shown illustratively here with the red hatching on the right. Next slide, please. So also regarding street walls, the inset diagram on the right here shows the proposed street wall reaching 321 feet before setting back to the middle of the tower above. This occurs on all three frontages of the site. The Grand Central Subdistrict has a requirement for a street wall of a minimum 120 feet, but a maximum of 150 feet in height. So, I mean, as I touched on earlier, staff agree that a strong street wall is appropriate here, and that could perhaps be above 150 feet, which would require a waiver. However, we have some concerns about the extent of the height being requested here, and the applicant is aware of those. Next slide, please. So above the street wall, the design does not comply with height and setback controls that apply above 150 feet also. So a waiver is necessary for the daylight evaluation criteria. The size of the site and its constraints mean that achieving functional commercial floor plates as the building rises cannot actually be achieved while also meeting the terms of the regulation. So a waiver is required. Next slide, please. So this is a diagram showing a number of waivers that are being requested at ground floor level. In the interest of streetscape activation, regulations limit the length of the lobby, the depth of building entrance recesses, and also require an additional lobby entry on a narrow street. The amount the floor plate is juggling here, combined with its dimensions and the need for ample lobby space for queuing and screening, means waivers are needed to address those regulations. On 44th Street, at the bottom of the diagram, you can also see a curb cut is proposed to allow for 3 loading berths. The 45-foot wide width necessary exceeds the regulation, which limits curb cuts to 25 feet. Finally, regulations require the loading berth to be arranged to permit a head-in and head-out truck movement, which the configuration and size of this site prevent from being feasible. Next slide, please. So just briefly, some of the application requirements for the first special permit relate to the transit improvements proposed and whether they've been endorsed conceptually by public agencies. There are also conditions that relate to the sidewalk widening and pedestrian circulation, building design and its context, as well as the sustainable design elements, all of which we've covered in the slides earlier. Next slide, please. Again, to avoid you having to try and read all of this, the findings themselves address matters like the quality of improvements proposed, ensuring that they provide a benefit to circulation in the network, and also that the improvements themselves merit the amount of floor area being granted. There's also further findings regarding building design and building bulk, ensuring its contribution to the streetscape and surrounds, and will advance the goals of the special Midtown district. Next slide, please. The findings of the second special permit, which is the waiver special permit, speak to modifications being made to the regulations that ensure a better site plan and an enlargement that is harmonious with the strategy for the special Midtown district. They also seek to ensure that modification of street wall height and setback regulations result in the improved distribution of bulk to ensure a harmonious outcome with the goals of the special Midtown district. Next slide, please. So a draft environmental impact statement was prepared for the project, and no adverse impacts were found for almost all of the categories analyzed. There was identified a potential for traffic, transit, and pedestrian impacts, for which mitigation measures will be suggested in the final environmental impact statement. And all of this is detailed in the DEIS materials that have been published. Next slide, please. So to summarize, the applicant is seeking to construct a 30 FAR commercial office building. The project is accompanied by significant improvements to the mass transit circulation network, both on and off the development site. To facilitate that development, the applicant is seeking 2 Vanderbilt corridor special permits. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Questions from the commission? Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So just to clarify, the proposed improvements for the transit network are under consideration by the MTA. What is the status of that question?
So the MTA has endorsed the improvements that have been put forward, and much of those have been recommended by the MTA to be conducted in parallel with this project. So I think that the developer is actually acting on direct suggestions of the MTA for those specific upgrades. Okay,
I thought in your one of the slides I saw was a side-by-side analysis between this proposed project and one Vanderbilt, or was that an illusion on my part?
No, so that is a slide I have available. It's in the appendix, and what it is doing is production. I don't know if it's possible to go to the very last slide of the appendix, and that's just putting side by side the environmental or sustainability attributes of each development and how one stacks up against the other. So you can see that there. It's quite technical, which is the reason I don't have it in the actual presentation itself. But I mean, it talks to things like thermostats and HVAC systems and things like that to elaborate further on particularly the finding of the initial special permit that requires commentary on the sustainability attributes that the applicant will be committing to. So, I mean, that information is there and we have it in the presentation, but I didn't speak to the specific details of it because it's a little in the weeds.
I was actually having a conversation about high albedo roofs last night, so I'm just wondering, is there an approximate valuation on the cost of the amenities that the developers are putting forward?
So I don't have a dollar value for you, and that is for a couple of reasons, because it's a little complicated because the on-site developments, the on-site improvements, including the east side access entrance, they will be constructed by the developer, which is Boston Properties. The off-site improvements will be constructed by the MTA themselves. So Boston Properties won't actually be involved in that part of it. So there's kind of two different attributes to sort of mix there. And as far as achieving a dollar value for it, as I said, we don't have it. However, there is a finding in the special permit that requires that the amount of the improvements themselves, which is not specifically dollar value related, but more it categorizes the improvements in terms of their complexity and their need within the system for facilitating improved circulation. And the stacking up of the improvements that have been proposed is sufficient for the amount of floor area that has been proposed here. So that is primarily what the department has looked at rather than a dollar value estimate of those. And, you know, I guess the short answer to your question is the amount of floor area that they have requested is comparable or equivalent to the improvements that they are proposing to undertake as well.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Commissioner Knuckles, much as I'm looking forward to being able to return to cocktail party conversation, I'm not sure that I would want to go to your cocktail party discussing high albedo roofs. That's my first choice. Commissioner Burney.
I would contradict that. I'll come and talk roofing with you, Vice Chair, anytime. Yeah, thank you, Scott. This is really interesting project in a number of ways. I mean, I think it's a sign of what's coming out of the East Midtown rezoning. And I think that these extensive improvements to the transit system would not have happened without the East Midtown zoning. And it's also interesting that Boston Properties are forging ahead with 750,000 square feet of office space at a time when other people are questioning whether we can even fill the office space we have. So I'd be interested to hear what's in their thinking as they do that. But they must have confidence that they can fill that space, I guess. I have a couple of questions. Could you go to slide 38 on your deck? So a couple of things, really. I mean, you know, Madison Avenue is one of the primary retail avenues in the city, and it's just a bit disappointing that we get such a tiny little piece of retail. And I'm just thinking that the end of the lobby that is closest to 44th Street and next to that retail doesn't look like a particularly useful piece of lobby. I don't really see people standing over there waiting to get in the elevator, and maybe the retail could be expanded a little bit down that end just to provide a more viable retail outlet. But the other thing is, you know, on the question of the lobby, there are a number of studies been done by Arup and others modeling entrance to office buildings in a post-pandemic setting. And it has to do with the time it takes to load up elevators, particularly if you only allow 4 people per elevator, get them up to, what is it, how many floors, thousands of people in 750,000 square feet. All the modeling shows that there will be a significant number of people out on the sidewalk waiting even just to get into the lobby because of the way these things get backed up. Now, that's assuming that we're still in the same sort of pandemic, post-pandemic CDC rule mode of trying to fill an office building under strict distancing rules. But I wonder, did Boston Properties do any modeling, and have they perceived that there would be any impact with office workers lining up on the sidewalk?
Not that we're aware of, and I think I can probably answer both of your questions or comments there with the same answer. What is being shown here is a maximum extent of the waiver being requested, and that applies to the length of the lobby, so the outer red line there, as well as the recess that is being proposed. So what they're trying to do there is build in as much flexibility for whatever those future outcomes of queuing and screening and temperature checking and things that might be necessary, because I mean, I think that they would probably agree with you that there probably will be an amount of sidewalk queuing done here, but that is probably also not possible in perhaps the colder months. And if they can accommodate that within their lobby space, then I think they probably see that as ideal. So I think we definitely acknowledge that there's a balance to be struck here between providing enough flexibility in the lobby space, but also activating with enough retail. And I think, you know, as those studies progress, such as the one from Arup that you're mentioning, I think there is room to take on board recommendations like that as the proposal, you know, progresses into more of a level of detailed design instead of what is, you know, not illustrative, but is you know, not far off illustrative here, just to sort of show how the different components of the floor of the floor plate at ground level will sort of fit in amongst each other. So to your retail comment, certainly I would agree that, you know, the corner down on 44th and Madison there is a small spot. That is the smallest it would possibly be, and is possibly not what will turn out, because it could be larger than that based upon this being the maximum extent of lobby waiver that is being requested. So that's something that they can sort of finesse further down the track as the design evolves.
Yeah. I mean, they must be concerned about it themselves, because to the extent that you're trying to entice people back into office life, you know, standing waiting for the elevator for an hour and a half is not going to encourage them, you know, so it's definitely an issue. The other thing is, you know, they talk about their energy performance and so on and so forth. And I have 2 sort of comments about that, and it's not necessarily the purview of this commission, but so much of energy performance is dependent on the fit up of the building. So you can say all you like about LEED performance, but if in the core and shell, but if the fit up doesn't carry that through, then it all goes to pot. And I wonder, are Boston Properties doing their own fit up, or how do they impose the energy standards on the tenants that they they lease to. And second of all, you know, we talk about decarbonizing our construction, but yet again, here is another glass curtain wall building which struggles to meet energy standards and to achieve decarbonization, but both in the production of glass and steel and concrete and in the performance of that under thermal load. So, I mean, I know it's not our job to opine on these things, but it seems to me this design of this building is very much a product of the last decade and not the future decades.
There is an amount of materials in your package that talk to the sustainability detail that they have at the moment. So I probably need to refer you to some of that. And you know, for your other comments, we could certainly talk to you about those when it comes back. Yeah, I mean, you know, to the extent of what the finding requires is what they've been able to speak to at this point. And I mean, I think even just in comparison to a very recent development developed under the same text at 1 Vanderbilt, that there is comparison. Sort of the slide that I brought up before, that the side-by-side comparison is that, you know, we are moving in the right direction here. And this is actually subject to greater sustainability performance regulations than even the most recent developments in the area. So certainly take your points, but I think we're going in the right direction as well.
Well, I'm going to take this up further with Vice Chair Knuckles at his cocktail party. So thank you.
Other questions from commissioners? Okay, then this application is certified.
Okay,